What's up everyone, Patrick here, welcome back. In this next video, we're told that a grocery store wants to keep the ratio of apples to oranges at 5:6, and then based on that information, we've got two questions to answer. We've got to find the number of oranges if there are 80 apples, and then number two, we've got to find the number of apples and oranges if the total amount of both is 132. So starting with number one, we got to find the number of oranges if there are 80 apples. So notice that the ratio of apples to oranges is 5:6. What I'm actually going to do is I'm going to express that as a fraction. Right? So for every 5 apples, there has to be 6 oranges. And so what they're saying is, what's the number of oranges if there are 80 apples, if they're going to keep this ratio here? Well, you could just set up an equation, a proportion. So we know the number of apples is 80. So how many oranges are going to be there? So we just have to solve for that x right here. And the way we could do that, we could simply cross multiply. So 5 times x is 5x. And then we'll have 80 times 6, which is 480. And then we can divide both sides by 5. So x would equal 96. So there would be 96 oranges. That is the answer to number one. You can actually check your answer too. You could take 80 apples over 96 oranges. And when you simplify this fraction here, it should simplify to 5/6, what we had here. And notice that it would, you can, let's do it in steps. So we could divide both by 2, so we'd have 40 over 48. And then notice we could divide by 4, so we'd end up with 10/12. Then we can divide both by 2, which would be 5/6, like that. Now, if you wanted to get over here right away, what you could have done is you could have took 80, divided it by 16, you get 5. 96 divided by 16, you get 6. I did it in steps here. So notice how it simplifies to 5/6, which is what we were aiming for. So we could be pretty confident that 96 oranges is correct. That's the correct answer for number one. Now, number two, a little bit more work is involved, but not too much. So what they're saying here is we have to find the number of apples and oranges if the total amount is 132. So notice here we are given, number one, we were given the number of apples. And the process would be the same if we were given the number of oranges, right? That x value would just be in the numerator before, you'd cross multiply. But here it's a little different. What we got to do is we got to take that ratio. So let me write this here again. So we got apples to oranges, which is 5:6. What we can do with this ratio is we can actually figure out what the percentage of apples of the total is, or the fraction of apples of the total, and then the percentage of oranges. And the way we would do that is with apples, we would take this 5 here, we would put in the numerator, and then we would add these two. So 5 plus 6 would give us 11. So 5/11ths of the total is apples. And then same thing here, 6/11ths is oranges. And then notice when you add these two together, you get 11/11, which is 1, which is 100%. Right? And so now we know 5/11ths has to be apples. We could take 5/11 multiplied by that total 132 to get the number of apples, 6/11 times 132 to get the number of oranges. These fractions here, another way to think of it is they also represent the apple to total ratio. So that's another way to look at it. What we did was we took this and we now converted it. We converted this ratio to a ratio of apples to the total amount of fruits, which would be 5/11, like that. And then we took that ratio and converted the oranges to total ratio. which would be 6 to 11. So that's another way to look at it. So now we're given the total, and so we would then just use the same steps that we did in number 1. So you could take the 132 to find the number of apples. I'll show you it in 2 different ways. So to find the number of apples, you could take the total, 132, multiplied by 5 over 11, which would give you 60. Right, so 60 apples is part of the answer, and then the other answer, the number of oranges, is 132 times 6 over 11, which would give you 72 oranges. So notice 60 plus 72 gives us 132. Also notice, I'll just do it here. Notice that 60 over 72, you could check your answer. What's this going to simplify to? We could divide this by 12, that would give us 5. We could divide this by 12, which would give us 6, and that's the ratio of apples to oranges. So that's another way you could check your answer. So that's one way to do it, multiply by the fractions. Or if we use these ratios here, we could say 5 over 11. We know the 11 represents the total. That's the ratio. So we're solving for the number of apples, x over 132, like that. And then you could solve for the x by cross multiplying, so the x would end up being 5 times 132 divided by 11 after you do all the steps. And then that would give you 60. Then same thing over here. You'd have 6 over 11 equals x over 132. Cross multiply 11x equals 6 times 132. Divide both sides by 11, x would end up being 72, right? Same answers that we got before. So multiple ways to do this one. Usually I just do it like this. I find the percentage or the fractions, and then I take the fractions multiplied by the total. But your prof may show it this way as well, right? So multiple ways to do it. Just make sure you're getting the same answers. And then if you get time, make sure you're checking your answers too by making sure that those ratios simplify to the ratio that you're given in the question.